Good morning, Rovers. We are enjoying our 8th day at sea on the beautiful North Atlantic. For those of you new to the channel, Rover is a 21-foot junk rig sailboat that I built in my backyard, and I'm now sailing her from Virginia Beach at the mouth of Chesapeake Bay to the Azores, particularly the island of VANE, and it's the Port of Horta that we're headed to. Right now we're reefed about 60%, meaning, well, we have 40% of our sail area still up. We're crossing the Gulf Stream, which is 3 knots at its strongest. It's north setting right at this point, and the wind is from the southwest, and the wind is blowing 22 knots. The seas are approximately 2 meters. That's about 6 to 7 feet. And yeah, it's been pretty good. The wind only piped up this morning. Through most of the night, the wind was blowing about 15 to 17 knots, and it made for a very restful evening, especially on account of the last few days where we had wind against current and really sloppy seas. These seas are relatively calm compared to what we had last few days. Well, here's a little change up I've made if I end up going overboard and I have to scramble back aboard Rover. That can be a bit tricky, especially at the speeds we're doing, which right now is close to 6 knots. So take a look at how I have the main sheets. This line that I have for the main sheets, it's going over and it's right down and it's looped over the engine mount. Now, the engine mount is what I intend to use to get back on board. It's like a ladder in many ways. And the main sheets, I can just tug on this, and that should free up the sheets. So once I tug on the main sheets, that'll free the main sheets, and the main sheets will just fly out. The sail will weathercock, and all the way will come off the boat, and then I'll be able to scramble back aboard using the engine mount. Because just look at the force that's coming out behind Rover right now. So just imagine trying to scramble up on top of that engine mount with all that force, all that water rushing back aft. It looks pretty powerful to me. So that's the reason I've rigged the main sheet like that. Just a simple thing, but and I hope never to use it. And really, I'm very safe and secure inside this cockpit area. There's numerous handholds. It's only if I have to go forward, but it's my protocol now when I go forward to tie in. So there's really very little chance of going overboard as long as I follow my own protocols. Well, Rovers, we have altered course because we were crossing the north setting Gulf Stream on an eastward course, and I got a notification from Seahawk, my meteorologist, saying that there was going to be a strong eddy a little further up that was going to, well, it was an eddy, so it was opposite to the main stream, which means that with this strong wind, and you hardly even notice it's strong right now because we're running with it, with the strong wind at 22 knots, it was going to create, like potentially rough seas. So I've decided to run with the Gulf Stream for about 20 miles, and it's so pleasant running with the Gulf Stream. You make great mileage, and it's just so comfortable, really. Other than a little bit of rolling, which I don't mind. People oftentimes complain about it, but it's the nature of being on a sailboat. It's one of the great things, I think. So here, I'll show you what it looks like from my perspective. And if you notice, the hatch is open, you know, even in these, well, the seas, I'd say they're more like 1.5 meters. They're more like 5-foot seas. There's other ones out there. I can see the odd wave is more like 8 to 9 feet, but generally speaking, yeah, probably 5 to 6 foot seas. The wind, like I said, is 22 knots, and I have the hatch open, and I'm not the least bit worried because we're running with it. Plus, it's an opportunity to dry out some of the wet clothes I've accumulated over the last few days. Well, I think it might be time to head below and make my daily meal. Here's a view of our main food stores. Not the only one. There's about 3 other places that I keep food, but in here, of course, we have all of our tin stuff, which is salmon, mackerel, tuna, and sardines. Plenty of sardines. Then the white jars, those are grass-fed tallow. Tallow, for those of you who may not know, tallow is beef fat, rendered beef fat. So most people are familiar with lard, which is pork fat. But this is similar in many of its qualities, but this is grass-fed, so it's a very high-end product. And then, of course, eggs. And I carry 6 dozen eggs, and all the eggs are coated in Vaseline so that they'll last longer. So if you've been watching now for a while, you know that the daily meal is Rover seafood omelet. But today there's a little bit of a difference. I only put 2 eggs in this version because I'm rationing the eggs. I just want to make sure I have enough to see me all the way through. And in its place, I put a tin of salmon, 2 tins of sardines, and of course a great big 1.5 tablespoons of beef tallow. And of course I put the 5 drops of iodine in as a preventative measure against glandular cancers, and of course a bit of salt. So the eggs are almost like a perfect protein fat source, and like the ratio it's perfect. It's what we want. Now the fish, and whether it's the salmon, the mackerel, or the sardines, they're all considered fatty fish, but there's really not enough fat in them, so that's why I augment it with the beef tallow. And between the protein and the fat, and that's all I've been eating for now over 6 months, my body is what we call fat adapted, like it's able to burn fat, which is called ketosis. So it's in a state of ketosis. That way, if for example there's an emergency tomorrow and I can't get around to making a meal, that's okay, because I have enough fat stores on my body that I can rob them and I'll be just fine, and I'll be able to get the energy I need to work right through. In fact, we were designed this way, you know, for hundreds of thousands of years. But just talking about this fantastic meal has made me very, very hungry right now, so I'm going to stop and start eating. It's really indescribable, that feeling of euphoria, excitement, and accomplishment I got when I headed out across the Pacific and made my first landfall. Everything was amplified. The bird song seemed marvelously fresh and new. The earth, it had a smell about it, a smell of wonder, a smell of richness, a smell of life. I felt that I had passed a sacred rite,
a sacred rite that few even dare to dream, made even more sacred by doing so in a small boat, a small handcrafted boat. Today's voyage is an extension of that first voyage. And for me, just as sacred.
Well, Rovers, the wind is 22 knots from the southwest, and we are outside the Gulf Stream. We had a great sail throughout the day. We sailed out of the Gulf Stream, and now we're just in, well, an area not far from the Gulf Stream, but my goodness, the seas are, you know, 1.5 meters, maybe 5 feet. And although the wind, it's the same wind, it's 22 knots. And it's just so comfortable. I'm on a beam reach. I'm making about 5 knots, and as you can see behind me, the sail is, we have 40% of the sail up. The Mark III, the wind vane, is doing all the steering, has been pretty much the whole time. I really don't do any steering at all. Just a marvelous design. I just couldn't imagine going to sea without some sort of reliable self-steering, and this self-steering, you know, this was the product of many years of thinking about it and experimenting with it, and I'm just so happy with my design. It's easy, it's simple to build, and over 500 people now have purchased the design and presumably are building their own. So the plan right now is to continue east on the course that I'm currently on for about 30 to 40 miles. Let this southwest wind blow out, and it will tonight, and when it does, the wind will start to veer. Veer means going clockwise, and it'll veer to the west and then to the north, and it'll be a lot lower. It'll be in the high teens. And when that starts happening, that's when I alter course and regain the east setting current of the Gulf Stream. That's the plan. All right, Rovers, thanks for watching, and forge your own adventure. Good morning, Rovers. We are just starting our 8th day. Good morning, Rovers. Good morning, Rovers. Good morning, Rovers. We are